I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, and we'll be right back to finish up our exciting Elvis and Paul, Angels of Aquarius series. Elvis Presley, Paul McCartney, Angels of Aquarius, two of the most famous men that have ever lived, and I think we've told an incredible story. One that's never really been told this way before, and I just wanted to finish up with it. I was going to wait till tomorrow, but it's an exciting subject, and I just wanted to go ahead and finish up. So let's get right into the last little bit of our data about Elvis and Paul McCartney. So Elvis and Paul, two remarkable men. Do I really think they were the two witnesses of Revelation? No, probably not. But it is interesting they did have 3.5-year runs, which is about 1,260 days. So very, very interesting stuff. And we talked about Paul, and I don't know, or excuse me, about Elvis, and I don't know as much about Paul McCartney as I do about Elvis. But my research has given me a new respect for the man and his music. I now count myself a fan, but specifically of the pre-Sgt. Pepper's and post-Beatles music, not the Sgt. Pepper's Beatles music to the end of their run. Now, I may be wrong, but I tend to see in Sir Paul a man who realizes he's made some mistakes and is doing what he can to right them. And in the end, it can be argued that Paul has given us more than the evil fall cost us, and he isn't finished yet. And I wonder if Sir Paul might one day tell the story of the fall years. I'd rather think he will. And I think it should be done posthumously, and I think it will be done posthumously. So let me just say, long live Sir Paul. But why was so much work put into the personal lives of two individuals? Why would governmental controllers care so much about a couple of rock and rollers? It wasn't so much just the rock and rollers, but it was the legions they were inspiring, and what they were inspiring us to do as we have a Florida thunderstorm rolling through. Think what it meant to the younger generation of the 1950s. Elvis was the first one to preach the gospel of individuality and complete freedom and personal expression on a national stage. Elvis taught us that it was okay to be different as long as you didn't hurt or belittle anyone else. He taught us that creativity is to be valued above conformity. And he taught us that individuality is a far more valuable asset than indoctrination. He really was the first rebel with a cause. And that cause was the full embrace of individuality and creativity, as long as it isn't taken away from the rights or individuality of another. And it's interesting, that's what it's all about with intention, too. Now, what did Paul mean? Paul, with a little help from his friends John, George, and Ringo, they picked up the mantle of the fallen king and continued to show us the way and made it very fun. I mean, Paul taught us to stay high, not on LSD or other drugs like the MK Tavistock-created fall, but on life itself, the highest vibrations. His Verdi tuning helped the generation that Elvis set free get high on life. He continued to stoke the fires of individuality that Elvis sparked and framed a message that was thoroughly happy, thoroughly upbeat, and thoroughly positive. So thank you, Paul, for that. Paul set us free to be kids again. The playful spirit of Paul and the lads set a generation free to be silly. What Elvis started, Paul continued and even strengthened. So, final thoughts on these two fellows. They not only called us to our highest selves, they set us free and showed us the way. Left unchecked, Elvis and Paul would have no doubt led us to the lofty heights of spiritual expression that have long thought to be the highest goals of the age of Aquarius. Now, that would have led the greatest spiritual, emotional, and cultural revolution in the history of modern man, and that's precisely why so much work was put into stopping these two individuals. By destroying these two, they were able to continue the incarceration of billions. That's why governmental controllers were so interested in a couple rock and rollers. In disarming the witnesses, they delayed the liberation of legions that they were inspiring, but they can't stop it. That's why we're doing what we're doing now. Elvis and Paul showed us with their very life's blood that the cause of good does have enemies, and with their sufferings and their victories, they call us to vigilance and to action. Elvis and Paul also showed us that a better world, a better us, is possible, and that all we have is to access all we need within us. to be the agents of this great change. In the end, they showed us that we're really all witnesses, that we're really all agents of Aquarius. We can all do this. We will do this. All that's left is for us to strap on our blue suede shoes and get a little help from our friends. Now, I want to finish up with this, and this is probably one of the primary motivations of writing the book, because as far as Graceland goes, Elvis has not left the building. As I alluded to briefly earlier, I've had the profound honor and pleasure to have spent many hours conversing with the closest friends of Elvis Presley. Among these are Charlie Hodge. You see Charlie here with Elvis. Charlie was the guy that gave Elvis his scarves and his water on stage, also played a guitar for him. Charlie was obviously the best friend that Elvis ever had. He lived for 17 years at Graceland. He had rooms in all of Elvis's other homes away from Graceland. And Priscilla decorated his rooms with his favorite color schemes. Charlie was often regarded as the kindest and most genuine member of the Memphis Mafia, with Presley's best interests at heart. No doubt about it. Let me just tell you, no doubt about it. Charlie was Charlie, but he was true blue, and you always knew where you stood with Charlie. And Charlie was with Elvis to the very end, and was with the guarded escort that brought Elvis and Gladys back to Graceland for burial. Hodge stayed at Graceland for a year afterward, helping Elvis's father, Vernon, with the affairs of the estate, and to be point blank, he would have stayed, but Vernon threw him out. Now, J.D. Sumner pictured here in the background with Elvis, and I believe this was from That's the Way It Is. J.D. Sumner is a gospel music legend and longtime co-performer and friend of Elvis. He was famous for his group J.D. Sumner and the Stamps Quartet and his associations with the Blackwood Brothers and Elvis Presley. I've spent some great times with J.D. He's got some really great stories, and maybe in another place and another time I'll share one. J.D. said that he used to get a whipping every Sunday at church because they went to a tongue-talking church, right, a Pentecostal church. And there was the same lady that would get up and give a testimony every single Sunday. And J.D. would do everything he could to keep him laughing, but he couldn't stop it because this lady every day would say, I just thank God, I'm so blessed. He's blessed every hair on my and she'd go into speaking in tongues, and J.D. would crack up, and his dad would smack him, so he got a beating every Sunday. But anyway, Larry Geller, Presley's longtime hairdresser, spiritual advisor, and confidant. Beginning in '64, Geller left Sebring to accompany, that was his salon, to accompany Elvis and style his hair for entertainment engagements, film productions, concert performances, and reception of guests at Graceland. He was really the de facto guru for Elvis. And it was Larry Geller who was the last person to ever touch Elvis Presley. Larry told me the story, he had done Elvis's hair for the funeral. And I should put that, I have it on one of my old shows, I should bring that back out. As they were closing the coffin lid, Larry just reached in and touched Elvis's forehead. So he wanted to be the last person that had ever touched Elvis. And then Gary Bridges. This is Gary in his Elvis garb. Gary was a one-time leading Elvis impersonator and still the only one to have worked with the entire concert band of the late King. He's my best friend. We've known each other for over 40 years, and we've been best friends for over 40 years. And about Gary, in 1984, Charlie Hodge and Jimmy Velvet, who I've also spent a lot of time with, discovered actor impressionist Gary Wayne Bridges, a Tampa Bay area, Florida native, that recorded 2 nationally released direct-to-TV albums featuring the current songs of the day recorded the way Presley might have recorded them if he were alive. With Hodge, J.D. Sumner, and the Stamps Quartet, and other close friends and entourage from Presley's camp, Hodge and Sumner both have publicly stated via numerous interviews that Bridges, a young 6'1" tall blonde, well, he's not so young anymore, we're the same age, he possessed the vocal mirror of Presley's voices. I was there with J.D. and with Charlie, and they'd put Elvis's voice, and the meters would go up, and then he'd put Gary's voice, and they would just peg exactly the same. So he really was the vocal mirror of Elvis's voice. And he continued to tour until 1983, when Gary went on to do some other things, and Charlie went to Pigeon Forge. That's from Wikipedia, Charlie Hodge. I've also included some anecdotal information from a former Elvis Presley insider that's not willing to be identified for this publication. And so, it brings us to this. Elvis is haunting his Graceland home. And he's not a happy ghost. This August 16th, it'll be 40 years since a lonely life ended on Elvis Presley Boulevard in Memphis, Tennessee. And the question is, why would a deeply spiritual man, unafraid of and well-educated about what lie beyond this world, still be haunting the place of his earthly residence? What has kept him here so long? Well, to understand this, you have to understand who Elvis Presley really was, and my lifelong talks with his lifelong associates have granted me a look into the true nature of the man we knew as the King. And conversations with these guys have served to confirm the ideas that I have regarding the mind control assault upon Gladys and Elvis Presley. Charlie Hodge was with Elvis in Germany, was privy to and witness of the stunning and rapid changes that swept over both those people. Number one, Elvis wants the world to know about M.K. Tavistock. One of the reasons Elvis has not moved on yet from this earthly plane is that he desperately wants the story about what happened to him and his mother to be exposed. He wants us to know that there's both governmental and paragovernmental entities in the world that have launched vicious attacks upon private citizens and will continue to do so until individuals that threaten to loosen this elite's matrices are loosed from control and speak out. He also wants the world to know that truth, to lift the stain of disgrace from his mother's name and from his name. Now, Gladys Presley was not a woman without demons, but she was a woman that conquered them to be of selfless service to her son. She wasn't a weak-willed, depressed alcoholic that drank herself to death out of weakness and lack of self-control. She never would have done that to her son, especially when he needed her most over there in Germany. And Elvis would also like to clear his own name, but not for the reasons that most of us would think. Yes, I mean, he would prefer not to be remembered as a fat drug addict that died on the toilet, but more importantly, he wants the world to know, see, and understand how even the most famous person on planet Earth can be reduced to such a state through institutional mind control and astral assault. I can hear his characteristic southern drawl saying, "If it can happen to Elvis Presley, it can happen to you too, man." The only real weapon against the dark forces that wield this power is our ability to expose them. And it's my belief he helped inspire this message towards that end. He's been hanging around, waiting for someone to step forward and expose the existence of these fiends and to expose their methodologies and their victims. Elvis has been waiting for someone to point to his example and use it to encourage eternal vigilance in the face of the continued existence of such persons. What happened to him will eventually happen to all of us if we do not stand up and be both informed and heard. Now, no discussion of Elvis would be complete without talking about the drugs. They were there, they were real. They can't be denied, they can't be explained away, but the real question is why. And every person I've ever talked to about Elvis spoke of him as a strong person. That's why the drug use is such a mystery to them. Larry Geller, Charlie Hodge, J.D., they all know that the true, genuine medical conditions that Elvis continually dealt with were staggering and did require some pharmaceutical help. But to a man that knew him the best, they would all say that a darkness would come over Elvis whenever they brought up the subject of drug use, because they talked to him all the time, trying to get him off of it. They all say it was like Elvis would be gone and some strange intruder would take his place. And I'm telling you, man, it wasn't Elvis. He was still subject to all of that mind control, even to the very end. And keep about it, these were guys that were rock and rollers hardcore from the old days. They knew about drugs. And they knew junkies. And each of them had their own issues in these areas. But they knew what they were talking about. Elvis wasn't a junkie. Elvis was a victim of mind control. And what a difference a little mind control makes. And after my extensive study I conclude that what these experts intimate with Elvis were alluding to were the nefarious effects of mind control. What they would see take him over was his astral conditioning and the work of his MK Ultra and Tavistock puppeteers. My only remaining question is whether the mind control continued to the very end. And both Larry Geller and Charlie Hodge told me that there was about 4 times between 67 and 77 that Elvis decided to make major changes in his life. But every time he decided to do it, and then it would just kind of fade away. And that convinces me that Elvis was at least under continued astral surveillance. And again, I have to say it, I think Colonel Parker acted as a spy. Parker had his private parts in a vice. He had unlimited access to Elvis. And one funny thing, the first item on all the agendas of change was fire Tom Parker. And the generosity of Elvis is legendary. Just a few examples. He gave $1,500, which was like $20,000 today, to the high school, so all the kids could go to a game. He raised money, gave concerts in his hometown, gave $65,000 for the Arizona Memorial at Pearl Harbor, donated all the proceeds from the 1973 Aloha from Hawaii, did benefit concerts after tornadoes in Mississippi, gave an elderly black woman who was walking to work every day a great big shiny Cadillac. And Elvis gave over 200 Cadillacs to people over the years. Every year he gave $100,000 to charity, bought homes for his friends. And this legendary generosity is the other reason why Elvis hasn't left the building yet. And I finish this up with this story, Graceland. And it is very hard for me to write, but I do so because I believe Elvis wants me to. Elvis wants the world to know another truth. He wants the world to know that he's upset and hurt at the treatment some of his longtime friends have received from those that now manage his estate. People that Elvis personally gave gifts to out of love, respect, and dedication have been met with hassle, question, threats of litigation. These people are supposed to be making sure that the wishes of the king continue to be carried out. And I remember Charlie once said, if Elvis was still alive, he'd be ready to kick some ass. And as sad as it is for those that are on the receiving end of the harassment, it's harder on Elvis himself. Here's a man whose soul has not gone on to his next place out of hurt and concern for the treatment people he loved are receiving at the hands of those that control his life's work. And it's moved beyond sadness. Elvis is angry, and I think Charlie's right. He would like to kick some ass. I've been told by first-hand observers that the ghost of Elvis is appearing regularly at Graceland. And not just back in the days when the boys were there, but right up to the writing of this book in summer 2017. He's not happy, and his anger's growing. And that's perhaps the greatest motivation for me to write this book. I feel I have to do all I can to help give some relief and freedom to the soul of a man that gave so much to me personally and to billions of others just like me. I'd like to appeal to those people. You know who you are. Do the right thing. Stop harassing those that Elvis loved. Let Elvis move on in peace. And finally, on the afternoon of Tuesday, August 16th, 1977, I was 14. I was driving to football practice. Came on the radio that Elvis Presley had died. I remember my dad just said, I'll be damned. I didn't know much about Elvis, but when I got home, I sat down and watched the exhaustive TV coverage, and I became a Elvis fan that day. Soon my walls were covered with Elvis posters and memorabilia. I went into the Christian ministry, and my buddy became the #1 Elvis impersonator. And he really is the best ever. He got Elvis's band together, and out of this came those long-term friendships with men like Charlie Hodge and J.D. Sumner. And I benefited by being able to be included in all those great hours of conversation with these guys. And it was like living, working, and playing with the king firsthand almost. It was a true privilege, and I can't help but smile as I remember all those great times. And I remember spending a few hours with Larry Geller. He added to my appreciation of Elvis. And then when I came across the information in the New Testament that we should be working with those that are in need of assistance even after death, everything kind of came full circle, because it was in that work that I bumped into Elvis Presley, and I've intentionally left this discussion to the end so it wouldn't prejudice your view of what we talked about before. You don't have to believe that I've had contact with Elvis to give serious consideration to these facts about Elvis and Paul that I've talked about. But it makes a funny sort of sense when you think about it. Here's a person, me, that loved Elvis and his music from 14, Bible college trained, credentialed minister, best friends with the best Elvis impersonator on the planet, who got to meet and work with and become friends with all of his band members. It really was a perfect scenario for the dissemination of this information. So vital is this information to the world at large that it is well within the realm of possibility that the events and experiences of my life were at least ordered in part to make the discovery and telling of this story possible. I mean, think about what had to happen. Think about what had to come together. And then I run into one of the leading Paul is Dead researchers out of the blue. The way in which these details have come together make me believe this book is nothing less than supernatural and the work of the divine. And so now you hold in your hands, or will hold in your hands, you've got the information of a work that I consider to be possible only by divine providence, or an absolute, pure, stir-crazy, bet the house on black and hit it big kind of luck and coincidence. Either way, this information is something quite remarkable, and it's my hope that what you do with it will also be something equally remarkable. We've got an epilogue about the peace sign, but we're not going to go into that now. So, really, I hope that what you do with this information will be remarkable. I hope that it'll make profound changes in your life. I hope that it may make profound changes in the way that you look at these two men. And I hope it'll make profound changes in the way that you look at other men and women that you come across in your day, and that you will be excellent to each other, and that you'll even consider being excellent to those that are, like Elvis, still on the astral plane, still needing our help, still needing our love, still needing our encouragement. And I hope you'll consider supporting me in that work. Well, I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. That's it. That's Elvis and Paul, the Angels of Ascension, the 1960s cultural false flag. I hope you enjoyed it. And I welcome your feedback, your questions, and please take this remarkable information and do something remarkable with it yourself. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, encouraging you to be excellent to each other.